Oh, okay. We did it, dog. We did it. Yo, 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 yo. Education purposes by man. Going to the things.
The Chambers brothers. Their story largely inspired the movie New Jack City, with a character, Nino Brown, and his crew, the Cash Money Brothers, putting Wesley Snipes on the map as Nino Brown. But the Chambers brothers were even more grittier, a family operation that redefined drug. The Chambers brothers came out of a world where you had to fight just to survive. They were born down in rural Arkansas, Lee County to be exact, a place where poverty was the rule, not the exception. On top of that, de facto racism made it nearly impossible for black families to climb up the ladder even if they worked themselves to the bone. Larry, Billy Joe, or BJ, Willie, and Otis Chambers were just 4 out of 14 kids in a household that had more mouths than it ever had money.
It was a real hotbed. Racism was a real hotbed. Even at one time, one of my brothers was walking up the road. I'm in a little small town called Lee Grange, Arkansas. His friend was riding a motorcycle, actually deliberately ran over my brother. And nothing was dead, but that was the type of stuff that we could expect back then.
Life was so rough that sometimes they'd sneak food out of white neighbors' buckets after dinner, scraping together whatever leftovers were there. That's the kind of upbringing that burned survival into their DNA early on. When they finally made their way up to Detroit, they weren't looking to play small ball. The drug game was already bubbling, but a lot of the older dealers had limits. They saw crack as too chaotic, too destructive, something that would bring heat they didn't want. But the Chambers brothers leaned all the way in. They weren't just hustling, they were building an empire. They ran things like a corporation, with a clear structure, rules for their runners, managers to keep things in order, and even marketing tricks. We're
So in other words, they're on point. They're on point.
talking 2-for-1 deals, discount coupons, and word of mouth branding that made addicts feel like they were part of a system. This wasn't sloppy street corner hustling. This was organized business. At one point, they were said to control over half of Detroit's crack market. On their best days, they were making anywhere from $250,000 to $3 million.
Thank you. Hold on. I get my hot man early in the morning. What time is it now? 10:35, October 28th, Tuesday, 2025. I bet how much I make today, man. Probably what, 2 pennies? What they were making anywhere from $250,000. That's crazy. Oh, shit. That's crazy, man. They bought
Per day.
What do you feel like the most y'all ever
it.
brought in a day?
Well, we had got to a point where we was making at least 250,000 per day, every day,
Damn.
every day.
Their headquarters were infamous, an apartment
That's the crazy
complex
shit.
called the Broadmoor on East Grand Boulevard and Ferry Street. If that
Yeah,
sounds
man.
familiar, it
I'm about to
should.
start.
The
I'm about to
movie
start hooping,
reimagined it
man.
as The Carter, the
That's after
fortress-like
hooping,
housing
man. I'm about to
project in
start
New Jack
hooping.
City. The Broadmoor was their castle. You didn't just walk in there unless you belonged. They had teenagers acting as lookouts, guards, and foot soldiers, most of them brought in from Arkansas. These were kids who'd grown up broke, and the Chambers sold them on the dream: cars, jewelry, women, fast money. Billy Joe, who barely stood 5'5", was the brains when it came to business. He wasn't the loudest or the flashiest, but he knew how to make money multiply. He'd flip properties like car washes and corner stores into drug hubs, hiding operations in plain sight. The whole thing was so tight that it was almost impossible to take them down, at least in the beginning. But no empire that big goes unnoticed forever. The Chambers brothers' flashy lifestyle became their downfall. They were rolling around in luxury cars, dripping in jewelry, throwing money around like it would never run out. That kind of attention draws eyes, and pretty soon, law enforcement had them under a microscope. Things really started unraveling when Larry's ex-girlfriend, Patricia Middleton, turned informant. She knew the ins and outs of their operation and handed it all over to the feds like a roadmap. But the wildest part
Oh, man, that's crazy, man. That one, that one trifling, man. Bro, can ruin it all, dog. You heard what he just said, man. You know what I mean? They sent the informants in, they sent the hoes in, man.
was that the Chamber brothers
They
basically
sent
helped
the
build their
water
own
hose
case.
in.
Larry and
Water
his
hose.
right-hand man, Jack
They
Frost
sent the water
Jackson,
hose in.
loved recording themselves. They'd film hours of footage showing off stacks of cash and expensive houses.
Should we throw these ones away, man, since we got $500,000?
Well, I tell you what we can do. We can give it to the poor.
That's
right.
exactly what I say, too. We'll just donate those to the
Give it to
poor.
the needy.
When prosecutors
Donate
got
money.
their hands on those
Oh,
tapes,
give it back to
it
the
was
people, man.
game over. The brothers had filmed their own evidence, practically narrating their rise and flaunting proof of their crimes. By the early 90s, the whole thing collapsed. Police raids turned up more than $1 million in cash and jewelry, 68 cars, and 250 guns. For law enforcement, that was proof they'd taken down one of the most powerful crack operations in the country. Larry and BJ were hit with kingpin charges, a label reserved for the biggest of the big. Larry, now in his 60s, is still sitting behind bars, a living relic of an era when crack turned cities upside down. And we see the cultural impact in New Jack
Hey,
when his
hey,
6 cities still
hey,
sitting behind
hey, free Larry Hoover, man. Free the Larry Chamber dude, man. Yeah, free them, man. Free our Chapo. Free all these dudes, man. You know what I mean? If we got time to be free and Diddy and all these other dudes, we got time to be free and Larry and the Chambers dude. Come on now. Come on, Chambers. I got you, man. Calm and Larry. Get out.
bars, a living relic of an era
Have
when
an Uber
crack
waiting for you
turned
outside, man.
cities upside
Everything.
down. And we see the
Transportation, you got your
cultural
Uber, you
impact in
got
New
your
Jack
food,
City. The
all
movie was
that in my
designed to
brother.
strip away any
All that.
glamour from the drug trade. Director Mario Van Peebles
Have a
made sure
wheelchair for you and
audiences didn't
everything.
just see
Can't
the
wait
money and the
for
power,
tomorrow.
they also saw the destruction, the victims, the broken families. Critics compared it to the heavyweights like The Godfather and Goodfellas because it didn't shy away from showing the mechanics of crime and the inevitable downfall that comes with it. Rafael Perez. His story inspired the infamous Training Day, earning Denzel Washington an Oscar for his electrifying, unsettling performance as Alonzo Harris, a corrupt LAPD narcotics officer.
I'm the police! I'm here! You just live here!
Perez, born in Puerto Rico in 1967, joined the LAPD in 1989 and by 1995 was transferred to the Elite Rampart Division's Anti-Gang Crash Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums unit. It was
I
anti-1989.
that shit quick. Yeah, you said 1989. See, man, come on. I'm on your head, man. I'm on your head, man. 1989 by 1995. You said 1985 in there. Yeah, come on, it's a typo.
And by 1995
Man, for
was
your boy.
transferred to the Elite Rampart Division's Anti-Gang Crash Community Resources Against
I should know because I was born 1995. 95, baby. Let's go.
Street Hoodlums unit. It was here that Perez's moral compass spun
Borderline 94, but 95 January. Let's go.
completely off course. Denzel
No more
Washington himself stated he emulated Perez's style to bring authenticity to Alonzo, even going so far as to include the license plate ORP 967 on Alonzo's vehicle, a direct nod to Officer Rafael Perez, born in 1967. The reality of Perez's career makes Training Day look almost tame. He wasn't just a cop bending the rules. He was a cop who treated the badge like a license to steal. Once he got into Crash, an elite unit
Man, that's crazy. I did not know that was based off of a true story, man. That's crazy. You learn something new every day, baby. Yeah.
with way too much power and not enough
That
oversight,
movie was
Perez
good,
started
man. That's
playing
a
both
good movie.
sides. He was supposed to be fighting gangs, but in truth, he was acting more like one of them. He dipped straight into the
One of the
evidence
members, he
lockers,
said,
stealing bricks of, cutting
"Oh,
them
I'm
down,
stealing
and
them.
pushing them back onto the streets through
Oh,
his girlfriend.
The
Angela,
anti-gang unit known as
you're
Crash,
good.
Community Resources
You was
Against
really
Street
out there,
Hoodlums,
man.
had a reputation as
You was really
hard-charging
out
and
there.
aggressive. But to civil rights lawyers, Crash
Mm.
officers acted like another gang.
They were conducting themselves in a way that they were very much like a vigilante group, very much like the group of people, young people that they were after.
And it didn't stop with drugs. Perez built a career out of lies. He admitted to perjury hundreds of times, lying on the stand, falsifying reports, and framing people just to rack up stats. One of his darkest moves came in the case of Javier Ovando, a 19-year-old gang member who wasn't even armed. Perez and his partner Nino Durden shot the kid, left him paralyzed, and then spun a story in court that painted Ovando as the aggressor. The lies stuck. Ovando was sentenced to 23 years in prison for something he never did.
Oh man, this dude Raphael Perry going to hell, man. That's crazy, bro. You mean to tell me, man, you gonna shoot a brother? Okay. You know,
Years later, when
oh,
And I don't think it's Somali, yeah?
uh-huh.
I didn't go back and forth.
Okay.
What's the name?
Oh,
What is it doing, yeah?
hey, mom. Hey, mama, dude, man. Listen, man.
They said there's speed of her 8 hours. Yeah?
I'm okay, mama. I'm okay. Hey, mama. Stay 10 hours. Yeah, yeah, 12. Hold on, they want to dude.
the truth came out, the city had to cut a prison for something he never did. Ice stuck. Ovando was sentenced to 23 years in prison for something he never did.
That's crazy, man. We have to replay that one more time. Pretty sick.
Ice stuck. Ovando was sentenced to 23 years in prison for something he never did.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm shit. I need to get to the water. Hold up. Mhm. When's the last time we paused off? Last time we paused, man. Imagine getting shot down, paralyzed, and then sentenced to 23 years, man. That is a 3 strikeout.
Years later, when the truth
Hey,
came out, the city had to cut a
that's the
$15
ball,
million
man.
check,
That's
the
dead.
biggest police misconduct settlement Los Angeles had ever seen.
The most dramatic case to come to light is that of Javier Francisco Ovando. He spent nearly 3 years in prison before prosecutors discovered he'd been framed. Perez has since admitted Ovando was unarmed and that he and his partner Nino Durden planted a gun on Ovando after they shot him.
By the late 90s, the whole Rampart division was a powder keg waiting to explode. The Crash unit wasn't just a task force, it was like a rogue gang wearing uniforms. Cops were out
Yeah.
partying, drinking on the job, beating suspects, and sometimes worse. Perez himself was caught red-handed in 1998 for stealing cocaine out of evidence. Faced with years in prison, he flipped. That's when the scandal blew wide open. To save himself, Perez implicated more than 70 other officers, exposing a culture of corruption so deep it shocked even people who already had their doubts about the LAPD.
Rafael Perez, charged with stealing and selling 8 pounds of cocaine in 1998, Perez has implicated himself and other officers in order to reduce a possible 14-year sentence.
The fallout was massive. More than 100 wrongful convictions had to be tossed out because they were based on tainted arrests. The city eventually paid out around $125 million in lawsuits, and by 2000, the Crash units were completely disbanded. But Perez's story branches out even further, tying him to some of the most infamous names in LA crime lore. His former partner, David Mack, was caught robbing a bank for $722,000 and was suspected of having ties to both the mob Piru Bloods and Death Row Records. Another officer in the circle, Kevin Gaines, was killed in a road rage incident, but investigators later tied him to Suge Knight and Death Row as well. All of these overlapping connections blurred the lines between law enforcement, street gangs, and the music industry in a way that felt almost unreal. That's why Training Day wasn't just fiction, it was rooted in the real dirt of the LAPD. Denzel's Alonzo Harris starts off as a rule-bending cop you could almost justify, but by the end, he's revealed to be a full-blown predator in uniform, a monster who thrived in the gray areas. Critics loved the performance because Denzel played it so smooth and magnetic that you wanted to believe him, right up until you couldn't anymore. OG Puddin'. A founder of the Piru Boys, his story has been debated over the years to have inspired the infamous fan favorite Uncle Jerome from Snowfall. This theory is fueled by a perceived striking resemblance and Puddin's significant involvement in the early days of the crack empire in Los Angeles.
Teach a man how to squabble.
OG Puddin' was known as a feared gangster, described as psychopathic and a killing machine. His reputation for violence was so intense that if someone spotted a car resembling his, they would scatter.
Puddin' made Piru what it is today. Puddin' and Tam, they was, I'll be honest, they were psychopaths. And I used to see them, I said, man, there'd be some good Crips, because these some straight killers.
And you had to be careful of that one person Puddin', man, because he had a green 69 Riviera. Ever we seen a green 69 Riviera, we would run whatever because we didn't know if that was Puddin' or not.
Puddin' came up in Los Angeles in the 1950s, born in 1954. His early life unfolded on 115th Street near Nickerson Gardens, one of the roughest.
What you just said, man? What? Hey, listen. You heard him. He didn't say Nicker, man. He said you. Hey, man. You're not slick, man. You're not slick. You're not slick, man. I gotta rewind that.
His early life unfolded on 115th Street near Nickerson Gardens.
He ain't slick, man. Bad action, man. Bad action.
One of the roughest housing projects in the city. In 1972, his family moved to Compton, settling on Piru Street, a name that would soon become legendary in gang history. Compton at the time was overwhelmingly black, with jobs drying up and opportunities scarce. It was the perfect storm for gangs to rise. Back then, the Crips were running wild, led by founders like Raymond Washington and Tookie Williams. They were spreading fast, intimidating everyone in their path, swallowing up smaller neighborhoods. Puddin' was just a scrawny teenager when he ran headfirst into the Crips. One day, he and Vincent Owens got into it with a group of Crips on Piru Street. They managed to hold their ground, and in the middle of the fight, someone shouted, "Don't mess with nobody from Piru Street." That moment became history. It sparked the formation of the Piru Boys, the set that would eventually link up with others to form what we now know as the Bloods. Puddin' set the tone. The Crips had the numbers, so the Pirus had to fight smarter and meaner. They armed up, bought guns, and went to war. In 1972, Puddin' and a few of his homies opened fire on a group of Crips, leaving one dead and several injured. That quadruple shooting marked the real beginning of the Blood Crip War in Compton, and it made Puddin' the #1 target on every Crip's list. From there, his reputation exploded. People said if you even saw a car that looked like Puddin's, you ran. He had a personal hit list, and he wasn't shy about using it. He famously ambushed Tookie Williams himself, shooting him in the legs and leaving him laid up for months.
I know he surprised Tookie. Surprised the heck out of Tookie. Over there on Almond Street. Shot him. Tookie didn't expect that.
After his right-hand man Tam was killed by Crips, Puddin' took his revenge to another level. He called it psychological warfare, shooting Crips in the legs, ankles, and feet instead of killing them outright, leaving them crippled and scared. But here's where it gets even crazier. Puddin' struck a deal with the Compton Police Department. The understanding was simple. He'd keep the Black Panthers from organizing in Compton, and in return, the cops would look the other way on his drug operations. The deal worked. The Panthers never gained ground in Compton, and Puddin' had space to build his empire. He wasn't just feared, he was making serious money. By the 80s, he was one of Compton's biggest right at the center of the crack explosion. But like many in that life, the walls eventually closed in. He caught a misconduct charge and served time. In 1987, he got busted selling to an undercover cop. Then in 1991, while still locked up, he and a crew of dealers testified against 6 LA narcs, accusing them of beating suspects, stealing money, and planting dope. Putin even said a deputy pocketed $16,000 during a raid on his mother's house. His personal life was just as wild. After getting out, he got into a toxic relationship with Jewel, Death Row's first lady. Their love story was nothing like the fairy tales. It was jealousy, arguments, and violence. One day, it exploded. Jewel shot Putin in the chest.
I had went to jail for shooting this. I had went to jail.
Day, it exploded. Jewel shot Putin in the chest.
One to the, you know? Pudding got one in the pudding, man. You got one in the, right in the hamburger, man. Man, the lady Jewel, man. You better watch out for this sister. Smiling and shit. Look at her, man. She look like she'll take you out, man. She look like she'll smoke. She'll smoke shit.
I had went to jail for shooting this Putin who started the blood gang.
She said it was self-defense, that he had been abusing her, but not everybody bought her story. Others whispered it had more to do with Putin's womanizing ways. He survived the shooting, but the damage lingered. The bullet changed his health forever. Years later, the complications caught up to him, and in 2006, at just 51, Putin died from issues linked back to that wound. Daff Mosley. He's another person sources suggest that Uncle Jerome was actually inspired by. For many, his story, particularly intertwined with that of his wife, Jamaica Thompson, provides an even more grounded, raw blueprint for Jerome and Louie's on-screen dynamic.
Louie! Louie!
Daff Mosley's name doesn't ring out as loud as some of the other big figures in LA's drug history, but the streets knew who he was. What made Daff stand out wasn't just what he did, it was who he did it with. His partner, Jamaica Thompson, wasn't just his wife. She was his co-conspirator, his equal, and in many ways, the engine behind their rise. Together, they were a power couple, running things in a way people hadn't really seen before. Their hustle started young. Jamaica was still in high school when she and Daff were selling weed together. For two teenagers, it was quick money, the kind that gave them a taste of freedom most kids their age couldn't even dream of. But once they were out of school, weed felt small. They wanted more. According to Jamaica's own memoir, Queen Pin, their jump into the trade was downright shocking. In 1980, Jamaica claimed she performed a sensual favor for a bail bondsman named Willie, and in exchange, he fronted them their very first ounce of. That was the spark. From that single ounce, the two flipped and climbed, and soon they were moving up to 4 kilos a week. That same year, 1980, they sealed their bond by getting married. The newlyweds also bought themselves a nice home in Encino, California, far removed from the blocks they grew up on. 2 years later, they had a son, Anthony, and for a while it looked like they had beaten the odds. Young, rich, married, and building a life most people in their circle couldn't even imagine.
I went over to her house and she had a Ferrari, a turbo Porsche. I mean, every car that you could ever fantasize about. A brand new swimming pool.
Money was my power. Money was my control. And that's what controlled me, the money, and I wanted the money.
But the drug game rarely allows happy endings. On November 23, 1984, everything came crashing down. Daff was gunned down at a car wash in LA. His death was devastating for Jamaica, but yet, instead of crumbling, Daff's murder pushed Jamaica to step up and become even more ruthless. Jamaica Thompson. The original Queen Pin, whose story has also been widely believed to have inspired Aunt Louie, another central figure in Snowfall. Jamaica Thompson and her husband, Daff Mosley, started their hustle young, selling cannabis together while she was still in high school. She kept email deal building Meeker Stallion led to Jamaica Shield Acts, all her son. 1993 being taken to those who played
would never come back.
Meeker was at hard time at Co. For Jamaica, religion began ministering when she was a sect-free path. The movie American Gangster performed impeccably again by Denzel. His story different path, becoming a professional skateboarder. Frank Lucas. His story is based on the hit movie American Gangster, performed impeccably again by Denzel Washington as Frank Lucas. But even Lucas himself has said that the film was 99% Hollywood and 1% reality.
He don't mean nothing to me. What's he gonna do, go back home? I don't give a damn what he does.
Frank Lucas's life started in the kind of poverty that shapes you forever. He was born in LaGrange, North Carolina on September 9, 1930. When he was just 6 years old, he witnessed something that would scar him for life. His 15-year-old cousin, Obadiah, was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan for supposedly looking at a white woman the wrong way. It planted in him a burning hatred for white authority, and from that point on, Frank Lucas was determined to never be powerless again.
My cousin, he's 15 years old, and you know what the murdering for? The murdering for wrecked his eyeball.
With little education and barely able to read or write, Lucas's early years were wild. He robbed his employer of $400, burned the factory down, and fled north to Harlem by the mid-1940s. Once there, he claimed he became the protege of legendary Harlem gangster Bumpy Johnson. But this is one of those myths that depends on who you ask. Lucas insisted he spent 15 years at Bumpy's side as his driver and apprentice. But Bumpy's widow, Mamie Thatcher Johnson, shot that down, saying Bumpy never trusted Frank and barely gave him the time of day. Plus, Bumpy spent a decade of that supposed 15 years locked up. But what's not in dispute is that Frank Lucas rose fast. He found a way to cut out the Italian mafia middlemen who had dominated the heroin trade for decades. His boldest move was going directly to the source, the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia. Teaming up with U.S. Army Sergeant Ike Atkinson, nicknamed Sergeant Smack, Lucas claimed they invented the cadaver connection, smuggling kilos of heroin in the coffins of dead American soldiers coming back from Vietnam. Lucas bragged about using fake coffins with secret compartments, each carrying up to 8 kilos of heroin. With each kilo allegedly netting him $300,000, he painted a picture of multi-million-dollar shipments arriving with every body bag. But most of that story is likely a tall tale. Atkinson himself later denied it, saying he smuggled drugs and hollowed out teak furniture instead. A federal judge even called the cadaver connection story one of the biggest hoaxes in drug trafficking history. Maybe it happened once or twice, but not on the scale Lucas bragged about. Still, whether it came in coffins or furniture, the heroin was real and potent. Lucas's brand, Blue Magic, was 98% pure and quickly became the hottest product in Harlem. He sold it cheaper than the competition, making sure addicts came to him. He recruited his brothers straight out of North Carolina, his so-called country boys, and kept the operation tightly in the family. At his peak, Lucas claimed he was making $1 million a day, though the real numbers were probably far less. Still, he was rich enough to live like royalty, owning mansions, offshore accounts, expensive cars, and rubbing shoulders with celebrities. His downfall came the way it often does, with arrogance. In 1971, he attended a Muhammad Ali fight in Las Vegas, wearing a $100,000 chinchilla coat and a $10,000 matching hat, gifts from his wife. That one outfit made him stand out in a crowd of celebrities, and suddenly, law enforcement knew who to watch. As Lucas himself later admitted, "I left that fight a marked man." By 1975, the feds were ready.
Man, what's up with it? And all these dudes, man, in Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, you know what? That's crazy. Pop, Frank Lucas.
They raided his New Jersey home, seizing hundreds of thousands in cash and arrested him. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison. But Frank Lucas wasn't about to rot away quietly. He flipped. He testified against more than 100 dealers, corrupt cops, and mobs. He was sentenced to his New Jersey home, seizing. By 1975, the feds were ready. They raided his New Jersey home, seizing hundreds of thousands in cash, and arrested him. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison. But Frank Lucas wasn't about to rot away quietly. He flipped. He testified against more than 100 dealers, corrupt cops, and mobsters, cutting his sentence down drastically. He even ended up with Richie Roberts, the very prosecutor on this case, as his lawyer and later his friend. Roberts became godfather to Lucas's kids, a bizarre twist that only added to the legend. But Lucas couldn't stay clean. He got arrested again in 1984 for dealing and did another 7 years. By the time American Gangster came out in 2007, his myth had outgrown the messy reality. Denzel Washington portrayed him as suave, calculating, and disciplined, while prosecutors who dealt with the real Lucas described him as illiterate, violent, and often reckless. Still, one scene from the movie was ripped straight from the truth. Lucas really did shoot a rival named Tango 4 times in the head in broad daylight, cementing his reputation as a man who ruled with fear. Frank Lucas lived long enough to see himself become a Hollywood icon. He died in May 2019 at the age of 88. Alpo Martinez. His story was the real-life inspiration for Rico, played by Cameron in the classic Hood movie Paid in Full. Out of the trio, Alpo was the one who really embodied the reckless, loud, larger-than-life hustler. Born Alberto Geddes Martinez on June 8, 1966 in Spanish Harlem, Alpo grew up in a Puerto Rican household where English and Spanish flowed equally. That bilingual skill later gave him an edge in the drug game. He could bounce between cultures with ease, building connections everywhere. As a kid, Alpo wasn't the type to blend into the background. He was magnetic, always smiling, full of energy, and people naturally gravitated toward him. Every summer, he left Harlem through the Fresh Air Fund program, staying with a white family upstate. Those summers gave him a taste of a different life. Big backyards, calm neighborhoods, no sirens blaring every 5 minutes. But every time he came back to Harlem in the late 70s and early 80s, the streets were changing. Cocaine was everywhere. The cars were flashier, the jewelry was louder, and the game looked too good to resist. Alpo started small, sticking up drug dealers, taking chains, watches, and whatever cash he could grab. But he had ambition. By 1983, people in Harlem already knew his game. 2 years later, in 1985, he caught a weapons charge and had to do a year behind bars. Ironically, prison only leveled him up. Inside, he met Rich Porter, a Harlem golden boy already making big moves. Rich vouched for him when he got out, introducing him to AZ Faison.
AKA Pat Pfeiffer. You know.
That link-up was legendary. AZ the Brains, Rich the Smooth Operator, and Alpo the Enforcer. Together, they became one of the most feared and respected drug crews Harlem had ever seen. Alpo loved the spotlight. He was pulling in $40,000 to $50,000 a week at his peak, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about the attention. He drove flashy cars, popped wheelies on dirt bikes through Harlem, and even had the nerve to kick police cars in broad daylight just to prove he was untouchable. That reckless energy made him a star in the streets, but it also painted a target on his back.
Alpo liked good things, nice things, but wow, get a motorcycle, buy a brand new bike where the crowd is at, do wheelies, crash it, and the next day go buy another motorcycle, thousands of dollars, 10,000, and just come uptown and light it up. But he liked it, that attention. And in the game, we don't need that. So I was always, this crazy.
When he expanded into Washington, D.C., things got darker. Alpo became more ruthless, more paranoid, and way more violent. His name was tied to so many in D.C. that even other hustlers were scared to cross him. One of the coldest moves he made was plotting with Wayne Perry, his notorious hitman, to Damiano Montana Benson, a dealer who was sleeping with Alpo's wife. That hit showed just how personal and savage Alpo could be. But his most infamous move, the one that cemented his reputation as both a hustler and a traitor, was the murder of Rich Porter. Greed and paranoia ate at him. He started suspecting Rich of holding back a supplier, of keeping secrets. So he lured his so-called brother into a van, talked to him like nothing was wrong, asked him about coke, then pulled out a gun and shot him.
I was asking him like, yo, Rich, where did you get that coke from, man? That shit was good, because I wanted to make him comfortable. That shit was good as a motherfucker. He's like, I got it from my connect. So from there, I knew he was lying. I turned to my little man. I gave him the nod. Once I gave him the nod, my little man spent, because he was short so he could stand up in the van. Next thing you heard was the 2 gunshots, bang, bang.
In later interviews, Alpo admitted it coldly, even saying, I just do that I loved, a dude I called my brother. Rich's body was found the next day, shot multiple times in the head and chest. Alpo's downfall came on November 7, 1991, the same day Magic Johnson announced his HIV diagnosis. Facing life without parole, Alpo made the ultimate street sin. He flipped. He cut a deal with the feds, snitching on his crew, his associates, and even Wayne Perry, the same man who had protected him. Perry ended up with 5 life sentences, all thanks to Alpo's testimony. In exchange, Alpo got 35 years, a light sentence compared to the bodies linked to his name. In 2015, he walked out of prison and slid into witness protection as Abraham Rodriguez in Maine. But Alpo couldn't resist the streets. Harlem called him back. He started showing his face again, doing Instagram videos, riding around like the old days, almost daring somebody to touch him. And on Halloween night, October 31st, 2021, somebody did. He was shot up in his Dodge Ram truck on Frederick Douglass Boulevard, right in Harlem. AZ Faison. His life was...
That's crazy, bro. This guy was really in a movie, dog. Crazy. How do you get out of witness protection? Fire, bro. I'm going back to Harlem.
Frederick Douglass Boulevard, right in Harlem. AZ Faison. His life was the blueprint for Ace and Paid in Full, the quieter hustler who wasn't as flashy but still commanded respect. AZ Faison Jr. was born on November 10, 1964 in Harlem. His childhood wasn't easy. At just 6 years old, a fire ripped through his family's tenement building, forcing them into a shelter for half a year. Eventually, they landed in the Sugar Hill section, but money was always tight. AZ struggled in school and dropped out by 9th grade, bouncing between odd jobs. He even worked at a local dry cleaner for 2 years, folding shirts and pressing pants, with no idea he'd one day become a kingpin. The turning point came in 1983. Like so many young hustlers, AZ saw Scarface and got hooked on the idea of living large. Around that time, he connected with a Dominican supplier who used the dry cleaner. That plug changed everything. AZ started small, but he was smart, disciplined, and ambitious. By 21, he was moving serious weight, earning up to $40,000 a week. That's when he linked back up with his childhood friend, Rich Porter, and Rich brought in Alpo. The trio locked down Harlem. But the game has no loyalty. On August 21st, 1987, AZ was at his aunt's spot, one of his stash houses, when it all went bad. A crew tried to rob him. In the chaos, AZ was shot 9 times. Somehow, he survived, but 3 other people in the house didn't. The most painful part was that the setup came from someone close. His sister's boyfriend, Kevin, had been holding a grudge because AZ once refused to put him in a deal. That betrayal cut deep, and it shattered AZ's trust forever.
And it was an incident where he wanted me to give, before he got locked up, he had wanted me to give some drugs to Rich. And I didn't. I gave it back to my sister, and I told him to give it back to him because I felt that dude was crazy, because the way the situation at that time, he was running from somebody.
Then came more heartbreak. In 1990, Rich Porter was murdered by Alpo. Around the same time, Rich's younger brother, William, was kidnapped and killed. Those losses pushed AZ to a breaking point. He realized the game only led to betrayal, death, or prison, so he did what very few hustlers ever do. He walked away for good. Life after the streets gave AZ a second chapter. In 1989, he formed a rap group called Mob Style, rapping about the life he'd lived. At first, it was straight street tales, but later it shifted into conscious messages aimed at steering kids away from hustling. He put out an album in 1991 and even did a solo project, but his real legacy came in storytelling. He became a producer on Paid in Full, shaping how the world would remember his story. Later, he co-authored Game Over, The Rise and Transformation of a Harlem Hustler in 2007, and he even dropped a documentary of the same name. His story was so important, it was featured on C-SPAN's Book TV during a Harlem Book Fair panel. Rich Porter. The third of the trio, Rich Porter, inspired Mitch in Paid in Full. Out of all 3, Rich was the one who truly embodied the fly guy hustler image. Born in Harlem, Rich jumped into the streets at just 12 years old. By the 80s, Harlem was a hotbed for young entrepreneurs in the drug game, and Rich quickly rose to the top. His style made him a legend. He never repeated an outfit, designer clothes every day. He had a fleet of cars and always kept himself fresh. To the neighborhood kids, he was a superstar, someone to look up to. To the hustlers, he was respected because he had money and he carried himself with class. Rich's bond with AZ was solid. They grew up together, made money together, and it was Rich who brought Alpo into the fold, vouching for him when others weren't sure. That decision, sadly, would cost him everything. The beginning of the end came in December 1989. Rich's 12-year-old brother, William, was kidnapped. The kidnappers didn't just demand money. They sent a cassette tape of William crying, begging for help, saying they cut off his finger. To prove it, they left a finger in a McDonald's bathroom. The cruelty was beyond comprehension. Rich tried desperately to raise the ransom. He was even planning to flip a big load of coke from AZ to get the money. But before he could save his brother, tragedy struck. On January 3, 1990, Rich was set up by Alpo. Alpo's paranoia and greed led him to believe Rich was holding back a top-tier supplier. In reality, Rich was just trying to save his little brother. Alpo lured him into a meeting, then killed him. The next day, Rich's body was found near Orchard Beach in the Bronx, shot multiple times. The heartbreak didn't stop there. Less than a month later, on January 28th, William's body was discovered, wrapped in 14 layers of plastic bags near a bike path in the Bronx. He had died from a blow to the head, and the ultimate betrayal was that the mastermind behind William's kidnapping wasn't a stranger. It was their own uncle, John Apple Porter, Rich and William's mother's brother, Haitian Jack. His charisma was so sharp it ended up inspiring one of Tupac's most iconic characters, Birdie, in the classic film Above the Rim. Even Pac himself admitted that he wasn't just acting in that role, he was channeling somebody he actually knew, somebody who had taken him under his wing in New York. That somebody was Haitian Jack. Jack was even there on set, watching Pac, coaching him, almost studying his own reflection being brought to life. Birdie, the slick gangster with gold chains, leather jackets, and a smile that could slice steel. Birdie, the Pac, coaching him, almost studying his own reflection being brought to life. Birdie, the slick gangster with gold chains, leather jackets, and a smile that could slice steel. He was channeling Above the Rim, inspiring one of brother, Haitian Jack. His charisma was so sharp it ended up inspiring one of Tupac's most iconic characters, Birdie, in the classic film Above the Rim. Even Pac himself admitted that he wasn't just acting in that role, he was channeling somebody he actually knew, somebody who had taken him under his wing in New York. That somebody was Haitian Jack. Jack was even there on set, watching Pac, coaching him, almost studying his own reflection being brought to life. Birdie, the slick gangster with gold chains, leather jackets, and a smile that could slice steel, was a mirror of Jack's real-life swagger.
When me and Tupac met, he was doing a movie, Above the Rim. And I didn't know it at the time, but he was studying me for the role that he was playing in this movie.
Haitian Jack's journey started far from New York. He was born in Haiti, but as a boy, he made his way to Brooklyn, stepping into one of the toughest environments you could land in. At first, he couldn't speak a word of English, which made him easy prey, but Jack wasn't built to stay a victim for long. He adapted quick, picking up not just the language, but also the unwritten codes of the streets. Before long, he wasn't the one getting picked on. He was the one people called when something needed handling. Jack carved out a reputation as a fixer in the underworld. He wasn't just a stick-up guy or a hitman. He was an operator, a connector, someone who could make problems vanish or open doors most people didn't even know existed. That kind of skill, blending muscle with influence, earned him access to both worlds, the gritty street corners and the glamorous VIP rooms. You'd catch Jack in the company of legends, Madonna, Mike Tyson, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder. By the time Jack linked up with Tupac in 1993, Pac was already a rising star, but Jack pulled him deeper into a world Pac had only heard about in whispers. Pac admired him not just for his reputation, but for his elegance, his composure, the way he commanded any room he walked into. Jack showed him swagger, schooled him on the finer details of being larger than life.
You know what I'm saying? I used to tell him, look, man, you can't walk around here with your pants hanging off your ass, homie. Let me get you something real. Change up your gear a little bit, man. Pac and Amani, Dolce & Gabbana. You know, I bought him a Rolex.
But like most bonds in that world, theirs came with a cost. People had been warning Pac about Jack from the start. His cousin, William Lee Sane, knew Jack from the Tombs, Manhattan's criminal court back in '83, when Jack got locked up for shooting somebody. Even Mike Tyson, a man who had looked the meanest fighters on earth in the eye, told Pac to keep his distance. But Pac was Pac. He thought he was untouchable. That decision would haunt him. In 1993, Pac found himself wrapped in a sensual assault case involving Ayanna Jackson. He swore up and down it was a setup, blaming Haitian Jack as the mastermind behind it. And while Pac's life was spiraling, Jack seemed to come out of the situation relatively untouched. Things only got darker after the infamous Quad Studios shooting in November 1994. Pac got lit up with 5 bullets, stripped of his jewelry, and left for dead. From his hospital bed, he pointed fingers directly at Jack, along with Jimmy Henchman and Stretch. That's when Pac delivered his chilling warning. Trust no one, not even the ones who put a chain around your neck and call it love. The wildest part was that the shooting went down right in the middle of filming Above the Rim. Real-life chaos was bleeding into the movie itself. Paranoia gripped the set. Scenes had to be rewritten, and for some of Pac's wider shots, the crew even had to use a stand-in, a look-alike, because the star was literally recovering from gunfire.
Hey man, what y'all saying? Holy, that was
The
crazy, man. What y'all saying about this, man? Next one we got.
kidnapping of Donald Porter.
Yeah, that's gonna be for the next time, but that was crazy, man. Hey man, leave your comments down below. Let me know kind of video we need to do next, man. That was a